Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Pei Zayin in Gitin, as we learned for a refuah shlema for Elazar ben Ruben, Yosef ben Azriel, Yosef Azriel ben Chaim Michal. So the Mishnah said on the bottom of Pei Vavam Beis that the first case was we're not dealing with that. The first case was where two people have the exact same names, husband and wife, and they sent to Gitin and they got mixed up. You give both to each one. If one of them got lost, you don't know which one to give it to. You don't know which one is the remaining one. Therefore, that remaining one has to be thrown out because you can't use it for either one. You don't know which one it's good for, and you don't be matzah and neishasish laoma if she's not really mutter. So again, if two Gittin were written for the exact same names, two people had the exact names, his wife and him each had the same names, and they were written lishma, everything was done properly, but then they got mixed up. You can either give both to each one, to each woman, but if you don't have both, you got to dump the other one because you don't know which one is for whom. Now, then the Mishnah said, what happens? Can you write 5 or more, whatever the number is, 5 Gittin on one page, one cloth, on one page? Can you do that? So it says you could. 5 people they all wrote a get, each one. Reuben's divorcing Leah. Shimon's divorcing Rachel, and so on and so forth. You could do that on one get, on one page, and the Edom are on the bottom. It's all kosher. And give it to each one. Each one of the women has to be given this document. Okay. Let's say though, the Mishnah said though, let's say you wrote each one as a separate form. In other words, you had one document, one page, and you wrote one get, and then another one, then another one, then another one, and then the Edom are signed at the bottom. It could be that the Edom at the bottom are only good for the last one. They're signing on what's right above them. So that's what he says. The Mishnah says the one on the bottom, in other words, where the witnesses always sign right below, whatever the document is, a witness is signed below that, right? At the very end, they're testifying to what's above. But maybe if there's 5 different Gittin on one page, they're only testifying to the one immediately preceding their signature. And therefore, only the last one is a good divorce. The other ones are not. We're not sure. So now the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom of Pei Vavam Beis says, what do you mean if you write it as a one group, a general 5 people are getting divorced, 5 couples are getting divorced? It's a general writing so that they're all divorced. But if you write each one as a separate one, maybe the signatures are only in the bottom. So Rabbi Yochanan is machlokes Rabbi Yochanan. Shama Rabbi Yochanan zman l'chol echad l'kulan zeu klal. If there's one time, the zman, when you list the time at the top of the page, if there's only listed one, then it means that he's including all 5 on that page. Right? If you wrote a separate time on each at the beginning of each get, right? If you wrote each get, there was a separate time. So basically, what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is that it's all the same form. You had 5 Gittin on one page, 5 different Gittin. Reuben's divorcing Leah, Shimon's divorcing Rachel, and so on. But if there's only one Zman at the top, then it's going for all of them. If there's a Zman for each one, then it's a topus, and each one is a separate one. And maybe the signatures are only going on the last one. That's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Reish Lakish is more definitive. Reish Lakish Amar at the top now, Pei Zayin. Even if you wrote one Zman at the top, that's also each of the Gittin are relying on that Zman, and therefore each one is a separate form, and maybe the signature is only good for the last one. What's a klal in which you can say that it's a general Gittin for all 5 and it's valid? The Kosav, you wrote it like this: Anu ploni ploni, we men, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, we 5 people are divorcing these 5 women. Then you're generally putting it all together. Then there's no concern that maybe the signatures are only going on the last document, right? You have 5 Gittin and one after the other. So maybe the signatures at the bottom are only going on the last one. Rabbi Yochanan says if it's one Zman, that's good enough for everything. But if it's a Zman if there's a Zman written for each of the Gittin, then they're separate, and maybe you have to be concerned about the signatures only being on the last one. Rabbi Shlomo says no, even if you have one Zman at the top, that could still be each one's a toughest. The way you make it clear that the Edom are signed on all 5 of them is to say we men, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 5 are divorcing women, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 5. That's very clear. That the Edom sign on that's clear that it's all together. So that's how Reish Lakish says. Reish Lakish, because of ploni ploni, we men, Gerashnu, we've divorced, Nishasena, our women, Plonus and Plonus. You list all 5 men, and then you list all 5 women together. Then it's clear that it's one get for all 5, and you have to give the get to each one. Maskil Rav Abba, Rabbi asked this question. Rabbi Yochanan says that if you have one zman for all of them, then that's a klal. It's a valid concern, like which Reish Lakish says. If just having one zman at the top of the page, one date at the top is enough to make them all together, why? Why is it all together? Maybe the Adam signed, and maybe the Adam who are signed at the bottom are only signing on the last get. Did we not learn? Maybe they're only signing last. We don't learn. Many times at the end of the get, they write end of any document. And we're selling this piece of land from Jim to Bob, and greetings to all, and greetings to the judge, whatever. They put some greetings over there, and the Adam are signed at the bottom. Maybe they're only signing on the greetings. Maybe they're not signing on what took place, because you have to look. The Adam are signed immediately below. You when the Adam are signed, you look immediately above them to see what they're signing on. Maybe they're only signing on the greeting. Maybe they're only signing that. Yeah, we agree that we testify that there's a nice greeting over here. So we'll explain that. No, I heard from Yochanan, even though Rabbi Yochanan said that, even though there was a brisa like that, Rabbi Yochanan that shalo posel v'shalo kosher. In other words, if he just says shalu, like what, that shalu shalom, like they're asking shayla shalom, then maybe you're right. Maybe the Adam only sign on that. But if he puts in the word vishalo, and we are greeting. In other words, we're testifying that Bill sold the field to Jim, or that this Bill owes Jim $100. And greetings to all. The ties it all together. Here it's said. Here basically it said like this. Even though there's only one zman at the top, what really unites it? Because even according to Rav Yochanan, it doesn't say they have to write we men 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are divorcing women 1, 2, 3, 5, but we said we men. Reuben's divorcing Leah, and Shimon's divorcing Rachel, and the third one, Levi's divorcing whatever her name is, right? Shpinza, etc., etc. And the Adam sign at the bottom. That's what unifies them, because you have the vav. You could ask what the kasher Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said if there's a zman for each one, you have 5 gitin on one piece of paper, one cloth, and there's a zman at the top each get of each one. Zeu tofes. Why do you consider a tofes? They're different days. He's assuming now that there was a separate date for each one. It's also a different date. Not only a separate date at the top of each get on this page, but they're different days. So if they're different dates, how could you say, right? Why do you have to say that they're all separate? Maybe the signature's only in the last one. Of course, the signature can only be the last one. How can you have a signature on the last one if it's a later date than the first one? We learned before that if you wrote it in the day and signed it at night, that's no good. Here, it's a davak at night, it means the next day. Well, if there are 5 different days, if the first gets written Sunday, the second one Monday, the third one Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and the Adam was signed at the bottom, how could the Adam be signing on the one from Sunday? Doesn't make any sense. So what do you have to say? It's certainly a different day. Only my this is how I explain it. They're all written on Sunday. They're all the same date. But if there's a separate date for each one, then maybe the Adam only going on the last one, because each one is separate. Maybe it's a full separate document. But where does Rabbi Yochanan say that it's all one big document and it's good for all 5? If you had one date at the top and you wrote Reuben's divorcing Leah, Shimon's divorcing Rachel, and so on. Only Rav Shapiro, who said that what combines them, what makes it one general get that's good for everybody. If you wrote, we men 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are divorcing these women 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Even if you have one zman, it's still each one separate unless have Ella hechidami klal. What's klal? The sib behachi anu plani plani. Like I said, we men 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're divorcing our women 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plani post. It comes out if that's the case, 2 women are being divorced by in one get, and we have a klal Torah omer because of law below law lechaverta. You cannot write a get. Let's say a man has 2 wives, and he says I've had it with both of them. I'm divorcing Rachel and Leah. That's no good. It says because of love, chaverta. So over here too, if you write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, divorcing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then it's one get written for more than one person. That's no good. The answer is the harder cost of ploni girish plonis. In other words, even according to Rish Lakish, there's the general thing combines them so that you can use one get for all. By saying, we men, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are divorcing these women, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Reuben's, let me be clear. Reuben is divorcing Leah, Shimon is divorcing. So then it's a separate get for each one. The Holocaust of Ploni Girish Plonis, Ploni Girish Plonis, etc. So according to Shlokish, you have to have a double. You have to have, in order for the get to be kosher for everybody, and to be sure that the Edom are signed at the bottom are good for all of them. You first wrote, we men 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are divorcing women 1, 2, 5, and Reuben's divorcing Leah, etc. Why do you have to have, you say you can't write one get for 2 women, and that's why you had to repeat, and Reuben's divorcing Leah, etc. What about this? The man has 2 slaves, 2 Eved Kanani, and he wants to give everything to them. He's giving everything to these slaves, everything. When he gives them both everything, that means that they acquire themselves and they acquire each other too. So what you do is and they free one another. That's the only way to do it. They both got, you gave 2 slaves, I give you both everything that I own. Everything. So what do I own? I own you guys, right? So each slave owns himself and half of the other guy, or half of himself, half the other guy, because the other half owes him too. The other guy owes half of him too. So they free each other. Yeah, so how does that work? How can one person divide? If you say that love v'lo chaverta, how do we know with slaves? We learn out the shifra kanas from law from Isha. So if a woman, you can't divorce 2 women with one get. That's what we just explained. How can you divorce 2 slaves with one get? You say you divorce them both simultaneously. If you freed one first and said I'm giving you everything, then the first slave owns everything, including the other slave. But here you say they both own each other, they both own equally. How does that work unless he did it both? He gave them each a separate star. I'm freeing slave number 1 and I'm freeing slave number 2 in separate documents. So, but which one was given first? The answer, he gave both to one shliach, and the shliach gave it to them simultaneously. He did it to them both. He handed them both at the same time, and that's how it worked. So the truth is, you can only write a get for one woman. But over here, we're talking about the 5 gittin were really written together, right? Each person is only divorcing one wife. That's how it works over here. And we have this machlokas. How does the general thing work? In which case, one get is good for everybody, or if it's at a tofes where only the last one is good because we're not sure if the signature is going on all of them or not. There's a price like Rav Yomi says what? That all you need is a zman. If it's one zman, that proves that it's all together, and you have to have the in between. Reuben's divorcing Leah, Uploni Plonis, and Shimon's divorcing Rachel, and Uploni Plonis, and Leah's divorce, and Levi's divorcing Shminsa. There's Zman Echad Kulam, and this one's on at the top. Why? Because there's only one Zman, and you wrote and in between each one. You have to give the get to each of the women. Zman l'kolechad. If you had a Zman at the top of each get in there, Zman l'kolechad echad va'edem alamata. Only the last one's good because the Edom are going on what's immediately above them. Pardon?
What if it's same? Each one has a date, but it's the same date.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Even if it's the same date, if it's not the same date, for sure the first. Let's say there's 5. If it's not the same date,
not that there's one date on the top.
Right.
Each
one has a separate date. Now, if the date is a different date, then for sure the last one is only going. But even if we said before, even if they're all written on Sunday, they all have the same date, still we're concerned that each one is a separate document, and maybe the Edom only signed on the last one. Maybe they didn't sign on the other ones. They signed because they're only signing on the last one. They only saw the last one. They were only there for the last one. They weren't there for the first 4. But if it was all together, either Rabbi Yochanan says all together means we 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divorcing 1, 2, 3, 5. Or that's according to Shlokish, rather. According to Rabbi Yochanan, this is one zman at the top, and you wrote Reuben's divorcing Leah, and Shimon's divorcing Rachel, and so on, each one, then it's all together. So but if there's a zman for each one, that separates them. If there's space between them, let's say that you have 5 gittin on one page, right? Each one is a separate tofes, as we're saying, according to Rabbi Yochanan. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you didn't write we 1, 2, 3, 5. You wrote Reuben's divorcing Leah. Then you had another get. Shimon is divorcing Rachel, and so on. Rabbi Yochanan said, if there's a zman for each one, that separates them, and then possibly the Edom are only on the last one. Rabbi Meir says, if there's space between them, that ruins it. In other words, there's space between them that shows that maybe the Edom are only signed on the last one. The Vlav, if there's no space, it's kosher. She'ein zman of sikin. Rabbi Yomi disagrees with Rabbi well, it's Rabbi Yomi was a Tana, but he disagrees with the Tanakama who went like Rabbi Yochanan, and he said even if there's a zman for each one, that doesn't separate them. What separates them is a space. If there was a border between, you had a border of a white space between each of them, that separates them. But just putting a zman, if there's no spaces between them, you have 5 gitin written on one page. Each one is the same date, but each one has a date. That doesn't separate them. It's still all the Edom are signed together. If they're all, when the Edom are signed at the bottom, are they on the last one or are they on all 5? So Rabbi Yomi says if there's no space between them, then they're all on 5 because they wouldn't have signed at the bottom. It would be a misunderstanding. They signed at the bottom, and it's understood that they're signing on all 5 if there's no space between them. That's Rabbi Yomi's opinion. The zman, having a zman at the top of each one doesn't separate them. Rabbi Yochanan said though, like the Tanakama, the zman separates them. If they wrote it as a general thing, what's that? Anu. We 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yerashnu, we divorced our wives. Plonus to plonus 1, 2, 4, 5. Ploni and we added on. Remember, we said that combines them also. The Edom are on all 5. Then how do you make sure that one person's not divorcing several women with one get or having one? You wrote Ploni gerish plonis, so Ploni you add on. Reuben's divorcing Leah. Ploni gerish plonis. Uzman echel kulam. Here he says there's one zman of but Edom lamata. Kulang Sherim. All right, they're all good. If you have a zman for each one, if there's a zman and space between them, then only the last one says even there's no space, puzzle, Rav Meir holds, like really Rabbi Yochanan, that if you have a zman on each one, that separates them, and then the signatures only go on the last one. Why does he say in this case where it's general, where he said if it's a zman for each and every one and a revach for every one, and the Edom are below, only the last one's good. Why do you have to say this is the case where each one is separate, meaning the Edom are only on the last one? Why is that? Why is that we have to say there's a zman for each one to make it a tofes? At the top of the page, it's how he disagreed with Rabbi Yochanan. He said even if you have one zman, each one is still separate, right? Each one is still separate. The only way it's not separate is if you write, we, the men, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are divorcing the women, 1, 2, 5. So why do you have to say we have a zman for each one to make it tofes? Even one zman is a tofes. That's why you didn't mix them up. In other words, you didn't combine them to say, we, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are divorcing 1, 2, 5. But over here you mix them up. You said 1, 2, 5 are divorcing. In other words, in this case, at the beginning you said we 1, 2, 5 are divorcing 1, 2, 3, 5. So what separates them? Having a zman for each one. He said having a zman and a revach l'chol. Then they are separated and the Edom are only good on the last one. But if you didn't have a zman for each one and you just said we 1, 2, 5 are divorcing 1, 2, 5, even though you added on Reuben's divorcing Leah, etc., that's so you shouldn't have one get for 2 women because you're really having a separate get for each one. Each one has a separate get within that document. Then if each one is a separate document, each one has a separate zman, then they're separate. But if you didn't put a zman for each one and a space for each one, and you wrote we 1, 2, 3, 5 are divorcing 1, 2, 3, 5, and then you wrote Reuben's divorcing Leah, etc., then it's a general one, and the Edom are good for all. So the idea is that if it's very clear that the Edom are signed on all 5, according to Rabbi Yochanan, one zman is enough to do it. One zman and the word and between each one, then the Edom are all 5. According to Shlokesh, the Edom are all 5. When you wrote we men 1, 2, 5 are divorcing women 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that was combines them. If you don't have those qualifications according to Rabbi Yochanan and Shlokesh respectively, then you have to assume, you have to be concerned that maybe the Edom only signed on the last one. We had a figure. Rabbi Yochanan says even if there's no space between them, so what? Even if there's a zman for each one, the Edom are clearly signed on all 5. Correct. But maybe they didn't do it that way. They were trying to save paper or save time or save zman, whatever it was. But that's the concern. Better to have Edom sign each one. All these cases, we were talking about what happens if you do it this way. If you do it in nice, simple form, you go to a Bezdin today, they'll tell you one get, one person, one couple, one get, make it simple. Now the signatures. Now we're going to talk about signatures. You have one cloth, one parchment, one form, one piece of paper. Shnei Gittin Shekasan, and you wrote them on, you have two Gittin written on two different columns. You have two columns on the sheet of paper. One gets written on one on the right, one gets written on the left. What's the problem? The Adam are signed across at the bottom, across both of them. Okay, across both of them, you have the Adam sign at the bottom. So he's like Reuven ben Yaakov, but the Reuven is under the one on the right, ben Yaakov is one on the left. So what do you say there? Yevanim here does not mean that they were Greek, they were Jewish. It means Jewish people signed in a great Greek form. Greek form, we mean to say that they signed the father's name here. You come to Israel, they call you by your last name and then your first name, right? So here, when you write, we say Reuven ben Yaakov, a Jewish guy, from Israel, let's say Reuven ben Yaakov. So Reuven is the first name, ben Yaakov is his father's name, right? If they are signed in a Greek form, then he gives an example of Yosef ben Shimon. Then Shimon is the son and Yosef is the father. Yosef ben Shimon means Klomer beno shel Yosef is Shimon. So here you've got a problem. Two Adam are signed on the get from right to left. Say Reuven and number one and number two, right? So it's two Adam are signed from one side, from the right to the left. And the two ones who were signed in a Greek manner, I mean, they signed their names in Hebrew. I'm not sure, but I think you could even sign in any language as long as it's, the people can read it. But they wrote it with not their first name and then their father's name, but they wrote it with their father's name first. Okay. So with
the Greeks would write it
pardon?
In Greek.
Yeah.
Greek language.
Yeah.
You do it right to left. They do it
left to right. Yeah, that would be a problem too. But even if you did it,
so the father's name.
Yeah. If they write, but here we're not talking about that. They wrote the let's say right to left also, but they did it in a way where they mentioned the father's name first. The first one, the Adam that are written as meaning the one on the right, that's kosher. The one on the left is not good. Why is it not good? Because you have say Reuven ben Yaakov, and then the second one is also ben, the second one is good. It's written right to left. But the other one, the Yosef ben Shimon, is not good. Why? Because when the Greek guy writes Yosef ben Shimon, right? So what happens is that Shimon is signed. Shimon is the left guy, and that's on the left side. Meaning the name of the signature, the name of the signatory himself, the witness. He writes his father's name first, then his name. So we say the one on the right is good, the one on the left is not good. The Gemara is going to ask, why isn't the right one good with the Hebrew ones and the left one good with the Greek ones, right? Because when you write with the Greek signature, because if he writes his father's name first and then his name is the son, so his son, so those names are under the second one, the one on the left. So why shouldn't that be good too? The Gemara will talk about this, okay? But that's what happened over here. Now here's a complicated one. The first one is writing the Hebrew form, meaning the son, then the father, the son of the father, and then the second one is written Greek. The third one is written Hebrew, meaning the son first, then the father. The last one is written with the father's name first. They're both no good. What's that case speaking about? So we'll see if you look in the little square in Rashi. You see the square in Rashi. Look from the second line. The first line is just like how it's talking about the text. You have Reuven ben Yaakov Ivri. You see the second line there? That's Hebrew. Then Yosef Yevani ben Shimon. What's the name of the signatory? Shimon. He's written on the right side, right? And then Shimon's on the right side. Then you have the Hebrew one, Kos Ivri ben Levi. The Hebrew one, his name is written on the left side. And then the last one, Yevani, Yachzel ben Naphtali. What's the name of the guy who signed it? Naphtali. His father's Yachzel. So we say over there, none of them are good. None of them are Shemson. We'll talk about this in the case with more. So let's talk about a very simple thing. In the first case, where you have two signed in a normal Hebrew manner, right? Reuven ben Yaakov, number one. Then let's say another guy, let's call it whatever his name is. Use a good, Yisachar ben Zvulun, number two. Okay, so they should be good. Their names are on the right side, but you should be. Maybe you can say that the signature on the left is also good. Why? Because he wrote the first guy's Reuven ben Yaakov. Maybe Reuven's one guy, and ben Yaakov is another guy. Even if it's the same guy, but he wrote on the first one, he wrote on the second one. There's two Gittin over here, two columns, one on the right, one on the left, two separate Gittin, two different people getting divorced, but they're on one page. And you said before, let them sign on each one. They're signed on each one, but this is how they're signed. They're not signed in a regular way. The signature went from right to left and covered both Gittin. So why don't you say the first one should be Yotzei with Reuven, and the second one with Ben Yaakov, because you could sign your name Ben Yaakov, right? Ben Yaakov Eid. That's now we're going to see in Amid Beis, Ben Ish Ploni Eid Kosher. Even if you don't say first name, let's say your father's name is Mordechai. You just write Ben Mordechai Eid. That's good enough. So effectively, the first signature is good on both Gittin. On the first one, he wrote Reuven. Reuven is under the one on the right. And on the second one, he wrote Ben Yaakov Eid. So the same guy wrote for both signatures. Maybe he signed on both of them. He didn't sign his whole name, Reuven Ben Yaakov Eid, on both of them. He signed Reuven on one side and Ben Yaakov Eid on the other one. So you got this. So the second one on the left should also be kosher because you got two kosher. Forget the Greek ones. The Hebrew ones should be good enough, right? Because you have two Hebrew ones signed under both of them. So L'skasha Hai Reuven. Ben Yaakov, Datran Ben Ish Ploni Eid Kosher. The answer is the cause of Reuven Ben. He didn't write Reuven under the one on the right and Ben Yaakov on the second one. He wrote Reuven Ben on the first one. That's really like in that square, although the square is talking about the second case. But he wrote Reuven on one side, a comma. Yaakov Eid Abbas on the second one. Let's kasha Hai Reuven Ben. It's okay. So the one on the right should be kosher with Reuven Ben. Let's kasha Hai Yaakov Eid. Maybe it's like Yaakov. It's a different person. Maybe that's his father. Maybe he signed on one, his father signed on another. That's nine. Each Ploni Eid kosher. That's good enough, right? The first one is Reuven's son. He's the son of somebody. The second one is Yaakov. It's a separate one. Two different people may be signed here. This is the custom Eid. He didn't write Eid. So he by saying if you write Yaakov alone, you have to write Eid. He by saying alone the custom you wrote Eid. The Adin and Beid we know that's not Yaakov. It's Reuven who signed it. Right? So you can't say the first one's good because it's Reuven Ben. The second one's because Yaakov. Yaakov was his father. Yaakov wasn't the one who signed it. It was signed by Reuven. The Dilma B'Shmo Davuchas, maybe he signed with his father's name. People sign by their father's name. You call by the last name, whatever. We'll see. The last name is good too. But Dilma B'Shmo Davuchas. So Shavik in Shmei B'Chasim Shmei Davur. Person wouldn't leave it, wouldn't forsake or abandon his own name and put his name of his father. When you're signing, you sign your own name. But then with Simona Shavi, maybe he made his father. Maybe he didn't write his father's name, but he made a symbol for his father, right? Maybe he made a symbol. Simona Shavi, right? Maybe that's what he did. We know it's not Yaakov who wrote it. We tell it's not his signature. So the son wrote it. Maybe he used his father's name. That's not good. A person wouldn't do that. Okay, so maybe he made a simon, like a simon. The Rav Sayakava, Rav would always make a simon, like an what do you call it, Michael? An insignia, like a stamp. That you have a like a I don't know, it's like a coat of arms. Rushmanka that you have that signifies this state or this governor or whatever. Rav used to sign like a fish, a Fnina Chalusa, because he has a ches in his name with a branch. Rav Chisda with a samach, there's a samach in his name. That was his sign, his symbol. Rav Oshia ayin, because he has an ayin in his name. Rav Barabunat Tzayir Akusa, he would cut a ship mast. That would be his thing. So maybe that's like a symbol. Maybe he did Yaakov as a symbol. So the chasavinish l'shav d'shmadavu simon. A person wouldn't have the chutzpah to turn his father's name into a simon. He wouldn't use that as a simon. So he wouldn't do that. So we know, therefore, when it's Reuven ben Yaakov, that's only good on the one on the right. It's not good on the one on the left. Because he didn't say Ben Yaakov Eid. He wrote Reuven Ben on the right side, under the right get, and the one on the left was his Yaakov Eid, and we know it wasn't Yaakov. So therefore, it's not good in and of itself. Understand, let's go back to the case. What's the first case? Two Edom are signed, Reuven, Ben Yaakov Eid, and Yisachar ben Zvulun Eid, two in regular Hebrew way. Then we said the other one's signed in Greek, but they wrote their father's name first, right? And then and then their name second. Okay, but if each one's written on one line, each one writes on not the way the picture is on Amud Aleph, but in the first case, you have each one is signed on one line, right? So the two Hebrew ones are writing Reuven ben Yaakov A, stretching from the right to the left, and from the get on the right to the get on the left. The second one is Yisachar ben Zvulun A, and then the Greek ones are signed with their father's name first, right? Let's say Yachzael ben Naphtali Yavani. So where's the ones who sign? What's their name? Let's say it's Yachzael ben Naphtali. Yachzael is the father, Naphtali is the son, and he writes his father's name first on the right side, and his name's on the second, under the left one. So it comes out we have two Hebrews on the right, getting two Greek signatures on the left. Why shouldn't both of them be good? We said in the Mishnah, only the first one's good, not the second one. Each one wrote on one line, right? The two Hebrew ones wrote son, the son of the father, and the second ones, the Greek ones wrote father and then son. Okay, so the two on the right are good for the right get, and the Hebrew ones are good for the one on the right because they had their name, the name of the signatories themselves under the right get, and the signatories of the Greek should be good for the left get because their individual names are on the left side, their father's name being first. So the one says, it's not get your customers. The next Mishnah we're going to have today says, if you wrote it in Hebrew, the get, the Eid of Yavanis, but the Eidim signed in a Greek form like this, where the father's first, then the son, or Yavanis it's the other way around. If it's written in a Greek form, I guess it's a Greek transliteration, or it's written in Greek. Maybe it's kosher, it's literally written in Greek. The Eidim are signed in Hebrew. It's kosher. Maybe you'll tell me, I'll tell you why it's no good on the one on the left. Because there's four lines of signatures, right? First two Hebrew, the Hebrew ones, and then the Greek ones. So maybe we're saying the Greek ones should be good for the get on the left because the individual signatories who sign, then when they sign, they say their father's name and the son's name. The son's name is on the left, under the left get. That should be good. Well, yeah, but they're 2 rows away. You have to say they're 2 rows away from the get, right? Because you have 2 Gittin, right and left. Then you have the 2 Hebrew signatures under them. That's for the right one. And then the 2 Greek ones, you want to say that should be kosher for the one on the left, but they're separated by the 2 lines of the Hebrew ones. So maybe that's like since they're separated by 2 rows, it's not good. The only problem, if you have space between the get and the Eidim, that's not good. Because it looks maybe something was erased, you fooled around with it or something like that. Why they should sign immediately below the text. If there's space, it's no good. But if you filled up that space with people who were non-kosher Eidim, like relatives signed it, then it's kosher. Rashi gives an example. He says that space is different than something that's possible. He says, look at a sukkah. 3 tfachim of space of a schach is no good. Right? Avir posel b'shlosha b'sukkah. Schach posel b'arba. You need 4. So in other words, there's different sort of space is different than something that's possible. Space is no good. So if you filled it up with something, and here is filled up with the 2 Hebrew signatures right above them, there's no empty space between them. So what if the Greek signatures are 2 rows removed from the left get? There's still no space over there. It says Hatani Zeiri Shneim Sheri and Echanami. Zeiri learns that they're both kosher. That in the case we just described, 2 Hebrew ones, then followed by 2 Greek signatures. It's okay. The 2 Hebrew ones are good for the right. The 2 Greek ones are good on the left. And that's what he says. What about our Tana? Our Tana didn't say that. Our Tana said that the one on the right is okay. But Tana Yidan, the concern is that maybe the Greek ones, even though they normally sign father, then son, father's name first, then son, maybe they went out of their normal way. They did something which was not normal. The normal way they signed son, father, but they said, well, since there's Hebrew guys here too, maybe we'll do it that way. We're concerned that maybe when you see the signatures over here, maybe one of the Greek ones also signed his name first. Then you have 3 on the one on the right and only 1 on the left, and therefore it's no good. Or all of them. Or maybe they all signed on the one on the right. Pardon?
The Greeks always write from left to right. So
They write. It's not that they write from left to right. They write the father's name before we're not talking about they write it in Greek. We're talking about they write in a Greek form where the father's name is before the son's name. And therefore, but we're afraid that maybe in this case they didn't do that. we're afraid that they used it, that they followed the Hebrew form, and therefore, as we know for sure, the one on the right is okay because you got two Hebrew signatures there: Reuven ben Yaakov Eid and Yisachar ben Zvulun Eid. Right? We know we had two brothers on the right. The other two that are Greek, maybe it's good for the left one, but maybe they changed and they uncharacteristically they also signed their name first and then the father because they said the other ones are in Hebrew, and then maybe they're all on the maybe all the signatures are on the right yet, and nobody signed on the left one at all. Right? You're supposed to have two signatures, but you could have more. Maybe they all signed on the right one. We're not sure. The last case was now this is the case. If you want to look at that box in Rashi and Amar Aleph again to remind you. The first one was Reuven ben Yaakov Ivri. The second one signed Yosef Yevonis ben Shimon. Because he went on the left. He started on the left, but what's his name? His name is Shimon, right? His name is Shimon. So his name Shimon is really on the right one because his father's name. Then you have Kos Ivri ben Levi, and Kohos is the Hebrew one. That's on the left one. And then you have Yasser ben Naphtali Yevoni. Naphtali, his name is on the left one. So he said in those cases, both of them are puzzled. Why are they both puzzled? Says the Gemara. Why don't you just say, listen, each one is good. Why? Reuven ben Yaakov is good on that, and the second one is good. And as the first two signatures should validate the one on the right because Reuven is signed on the right, and Shimon signed in Greek is also on the right. Then the one on the left, you have a Hebrew one, Kahas, who signed on the left. And Yasser ben Naphtali also is on. Naphtali is also on the left. So why don't you say that each one should be kosher with one Ivri and one Yevani, like we just explained. That's not Yevani is also kosher. They don't both be written in Hebrew. They could be written one in Hebrew, one in Greek. Even with Greek letters, but we're talking more about the form. We're concerned not about how they signed it. We're talking about where did they put their name and their father's name. So that should be good. So Tani Zirish name Shemei is the Iri said they're both kosher in this case. Tani and our Tana said they're both good. Our concern is this: not that they. Why don't you say at least one is good? We don't know. It could be that three are on one and one is on the other. In other words, again, maybe one of the two Greek ones signed like the Hebrew one. So when it says Reuben ben Yaakov on the right side, and then Yosef ben Shimon, we're assuming Shimon is the name of the signatory, the Greek signatory. No, maybe his name is really Yosef, and therefore he signed on the left one. Okay, so then you have maybe that, maybe not. We don't know. So maybe you have Reuven on the right side, you have Kahas on the left, you have Yosef on the left, and maybe Yachsel ben Naphtali is also Naphtali is on the left. In other words, maybe Yachsel ben Naphtali, he wrote the regular Greek way. And then you have Naphtali, Kahas, and Yosef on one side, and only Reuben on the other side, or reverse. Maybe the last Greek guy, he signed Yachsel on the right side, right? And you have Shimon on the right side because he did the normal Greek way, and Reuben is on the right side, and only Kahas is only one on the left side. So we're not sure, and therefore we say they're both possible. You can't use it. Shiur mixes to get the cusp of Daf Sheni. Let's say again, we talk about having two gitin or five gitin on one page, or in this last case, you have two gitin, one doesn't. What happens if you have one page, only one get, but he went from one, he didn't finish by the bottom of the page, he didn't finish it, so he went up to the left column. He went from one column to another column. We don't do that, Lamais. You make sure you don't play around with those things. But let's say Shiur mixes at the cusp of Daf Sheni, but Eidim Malamat, the Eidim underneath that's kosher. Now we're going to talk about that. Meaning you finished the column, but you didn't finish the whole thing. You still had a line or two at the top, and then the Eidim were signed. That's kosher. Even if it's not written in one column, it's kosher. The Gemara is going to say, well, how do you know that it's still kosher? Let's say the Eidim signed at the top of the, when you start off, here's the Zman, here in New York, so that's no good. Or minatzano me'achor, we get pasha. It is a get that's written on one side, not a get a kashur that's folded up. But on a regular get that's all written on one side, the Eidim have to be signed at the bottom of the text. You can't have them on the back or at the top or on the side because you're not clear what they're signing on. Let's say you had two gittin on one page, but they were written this way, like on the side to side, both starting in the middle and going to the side. So let's say you did that. That's how they wrote it, in Ethiopia or whatever, they wrote it that way. He can write the Edom are in the middle, but the Edom are not signed at the bottom of either text, right? They're signed at the top of one of the texts. Also, Shneim Sulim. Let's say you had the end of each get next to the end. You had opposite, you started at the opposite sides and you came in the middle, and the Edom were signed in the middle. One of them is good, the one where the Edom are written in the same manner, vertically, at the end of one of them. The Edom are at the end of one and sort of underneath the other one, but upside down, right? If you have two, you started writing a get from one side, one from the other side, and the Edom are in the middle. Well, if the Edom are signed at the bottom of the one that you're reading it with, you're reading, where the text is, they're written on the same way as the text is, then that's kosher. The other one's not. Get your custom Ibris, this is we mentioned before. The get that's written in Hebrew and the Edom are signed in Greek. Not, either Greek letters or Greek, but clearly we're concerned about the father's name first and the son's name, or Yavanis Ve'edaviv the other way around, or Eid Echadivi Ve'echad Yavani. That's all kosher. What's the Bach here? Yavani kosher. Kosav Sofer, Ksav Sofer Ve'ed. Let's say the Sofer wrote it and 1/8 signed it. That's kosher. And we'll see in the Gemara, we had this before, Rav Yomi says that the Sofer also signed on it. He wrote it and he signed it, so you have two signatures. Ish Ploni A kosher. Even just write Ish Ploni, you didn't say, Reuven ben Yaakov. Ish Ploni A, that's kosher. Or Ben Ish Ploni A kosher. The son of Yaakov kosher, if you wrote that. In our case, we said if we would have written Ben Yaakov 8 on one side, that would have been a good signature, but we didn't do that. He wrote Reuven ben under one get, and Yaakov 8 on the other side. And we know this wasn't Yaakov, it was the son. So therefore it's no good. Ben Ish Ploni 8 kosher. Ish Ploni, Ben Ish Ploni, even if you didn't write 8, you just wrote Reuben, the son of Yaakov, that's kosher. Below kosher, it's also kosher. The people who were pure, the people of pure mind, they were very brief and clear. They used to write Osin, they would write, Reuben ben Yaakov, they didn't write the word 8. Today we're machmer to do all the chumras. Reuben ben Yaakov 8, you have to write 8 every kosher. If you wrote the name that they were known by, it was in the get. This is talking about in the get, presumably, in the get, where you wrote the names of the husband and the wife. Even if you didn't write the son of Reuben, the son of this, or her, the girl, the son, the daughter of so and so, you just write like their last names. As long as it's clear that you're talking about, it's also kosher. So all these cases are kosher, and as long as the Edom have to be signed in the same level, in the same form, in the same manner, exactly under the text of the get. Going back to the very first case, we said Shiur mix. Let's say you finished the get and you finished the column and you didn't finish the get. You had to go to the next column. Is that okay? So he said that's okay. Shiur mix the get because of the Daf Hayomi. He wrote it on the second column. It's kosher. Why aren't you concerned about this? You had a big cloth, let's say a big document, right? And you say if you finish this one, you went out to the other column. Maybe there was another get written in the second column above this, and you cut it off. Right? Maybe that's, but why aren't you concerned? Dilma, honey, tray, get there. Maybe there were two getting on this piece of paper, this document, this cloth. The Isrami has to be parchment, like a Sefer Torah mezuzahs. You have to write it on parchment. They can't fool with it. The Isrami is man de kama of Edom de Basra, and it turned out that the Zman of the first one was about the same level as the Edom of the second one. In other words, you had two getting. One was written further down on the right side, and one was written further up on the left side. And the Edom on the left side, which was possibly on another get, were about the same level as the Zman on the right side of the get on the right side. Maybe there were two different get numbers. Zman de Kama and Basra. The Gazil Zman de Basra. You cut off the top part of the second get, the Edom de Kama and the Edom of the first get written at the bottom. And now you want to say that the first get is good with the Edom of the second one, but the Edom are really signed on the second one, not on the first one. How do you know this is all one get? Maybe there were two getting over here, and you cut off the top of the second one and the bottom of the first one. On the first one, there's plenty of space at the bottom, right? There's plenty of space at the bottom, so you know that nothing was cut off over there, right? You didn't cut off. There's space there, so you can't say you cut off the Edom there. So clearly, the Edom are going on the one on the right. The Dumas man the Basra maybe is guys, yeah. Maybe you cut off the Zman of the second one, the top one. So how do you know you didn't cut off that one? Maybe, okay, so there's space there, but maybe still it's part of the second one. Shema get shalom. And why would you cut that off? You cut off the bottom of the first one because maybe there's some condition in there that you wanted to get rid of, and you want to kasher, you want to cut off that condition and kasher it with the Adam sign on the one on the left. So the more of the Zman the Basra guys, Shema Gebash, Shema get shalom nimlach. Maybe a guy was writing get and he changed his mind. Well, the Mali man decided there was another get on the second side. When he decided, he said, "Yeah, I am gonna divorce her." And he cut off the top of the second one, the Zman there. In other words, it had a different Zman there, and he wanted to make it look like he wrote it all together. The bas from Megas Gazier. Rav Abba Amarav, Shiesh Rebbe Hamata, right? There's space on the bottom. Oh, that's like Rav said just before, there's space on the bottom. In other words, there's clearly a lot of space above and space below, so you can't say they cut off the top of the second one and the bottom of the first one. But maybe he changed his mind in between. He wrote the get, he changed his mind because maybe the problem is not that it's a second get, but maybe it's a different time. Maybe he changed his mind. He didn't want to divorce her, and after time, he decided to divorce her. But now this man is no good. It's like nichtav yom nech balala. It's got to be written all together at the same time. Because of reyat melamata mutaris lamala. You can't say that he changed his mind in the middle, because at the bottom, the last words in the first on the first column were hareyat, and the first words at the top of the second column were mutaris l'chol adam. So it's clear that's one phrase. So v'dumas ramilei, maybe it just happened that way. So in the middle of writing hareyat, he changed his mind and he stopped and he picked it up a week later, in which case it's on 2 different days. We're not concerned that in the middle of a thought, in the middle of a phrase, he would have changed his mind. Rashi says you don't have to come on to all this business about the cutting. The idea bay mitachta the Megillah, so you could tell from the stretching of the Megillah, of the parchment, meaning when they prepare the parchment, it has to be prepared like a tefillin and mezuzahs, they stretch it and they use stones, Rashi says, to stretch it, so you could tell from the border that this wasn't fooled with. That's what we're speaking about over here. When you could tell that it wasn't fooled with, there was one original document, there was nothing extra over here, it couldn't have been cut off. And the point is that you could write the get on 2 different columns and technically it's okay. Sure, they wouldn't do that today, but technically it would be all right. All right, tomorrow's daf is daf Peches, that'll be on the podcast. On Sunday, we'll pick it up from the second line, Amarav, at the beginning of the second line on daf Peches. Shabbat shalom l'kulam.
And they get the English.